Everyone, please start the recording. I'd like to call the coordinating committee meeting to order. As permitted by the governor's disaster declaration of October 14th, 2022, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee to meet in person. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, we will post the meeting materials approximately 1 week in advance, and we'll provide a recording of this meeting link to our website, and we'll take all votes by a roll call. Staff has some additional virtual meeting logistic announcements before we take the roll. Katie?
Good morning, everyone. Just some announcements for our virtual meeting. The meeting is being recorded. Please use the mute function when not speaking. This will help open the space. Members, if you have a question during the meeting, please use the chat line. The staff will be monitoring. And additionally, if you have comments during the public speaking agenda item, you can indicate your desire to speak up in the chat box as well. And then members of the committee, when speaking, or when you motion, please use your recorder properly. And that concludes my meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Katie. Under agenda changes and announcements, are there any agenda changes? Thank you. Hearing none, we'll move on to our next item, which is executive director's announcements, and I will turn it to Erin for a few words.
Sounds good. Do we need to take a roll call for this meeting? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that.
No.
Okay, so your the next person is Deborah Stone, filling in for Aaron Dernbach.
Present.
Jessica Hector-Sue.
Here.
And Bob Tucker.
Here.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. And now I will turn to Erin. Welcome,
Thanks.
Erin. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple announcements before the meeting gets started here. On your agenda today, our climate committee liaisons are going to provide an update on the important work completed by this group over the last 11 months and our plans for next year. You'll find the committee's annual report summarizing its work completed and future work. The committee will hold its 4th meeting on November 29th. I want to thank you to President Reinbold, the Climate Committee Chair, for your leadership and your commitment to the members for their work to advance our climate goals. In the coming months, we're going to continue to focus on a couple of key priority areas. Greenhouse gas emission reductions. We are working on a regional approach to meet the federal requirements of reducing greenhouse gases on the national highway system by 50% of 2005 levels by 2030 and set regional targets. We will also continue to focus on freight strategies to make sure that we're balancing the needed network investments and maintain our status as North America's freight hub, but also thinking about how we balance that with the need to mitigate the negative quality of life impacts on our most vulnerable communities, such as safety, noise, and air quality. And then other work that will happen under our climate portfolio is related to electric vehicle infrastructure planning, transportation mitigation planning, resiliency improvement planning, and work around our water resources as well. So you'll hear more about that in coming agendas, but wanted to just touch on that. And then also today you'll hear a little bit about our CARE program, which is an acronym for the Community Alliance for Regional Equity. One of the things that really brought about this initiative was during the summer of 2020, when we were home from COVID and after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. I know that many agencies, government agencies, were thinking about what they could do to address racial inequities. And one of the things that CMAP did was put out an RFP to get consultants to help us think through bringing community voices to the regional planning table, but not just in a way where we're doing community engagement on the local level, but how are we thinking about elevating our role and understanding how our data and information can help not just governments, but community-based organizations and those who have been left behind. So we are working on engaging in a process that will bring those community organizations to the table, pay them for their time to be here and talk with us and bring their expertise. We have 55 applicants to the program from across the region. We will be selecting 12 of them and who will participate in this first round of engagement here. So again, this is something that is new, that we're piloting, that we're also documenting because we are spending federal transportation dollars on this initiative as well, and want to make sure that this is something that could be potentially replicable with our federal transportation funds as well. So I'm proud of this work. I know the team is also very proud of this work. I'm excited to share a little bit on this with you today. So that's it for me.
Very good. Thank you, Erin. Are there any questions for Erin? Okay, thank you again, Erin. We appreciate that. Hearing none, we will move on to our next item, which is item 3.01, which is approval of the minutes. Copy of the minutes for our September 14th, 2022 meeting are included in our packet. Are there any requests for corrections, changes, or deletions? Okay, before I ask for a motion, just a reminder to please identify yourself when making the motion. Can I get a motion and a second for the approval of the minutes, please?
Hector Sue motion.
Bob Tucker, second.
Very good, thank you. Roll call, please.
Chairman Reinbold,
Yes.
Peter Lally,
Yes.
Deborah Stone,
I wasn't here, so I abstain.
Jessica Hector Sue,
Aye.
and Bob Tucker.
Aye.
Thank you, motion carries. We will now move on to our new business items. Our first item 4.01, which is the Climate Committee Annual Report. For this first item, staff will provide the committee with an overview of the Climate Committee Annual Report and will lead our discussion. I'd like to turn this over now to our presenters, Brian Daly and Jamie Jackson. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Reinbold. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Daly. I'm a senior planner in the Regional Policy Implementation Division, and along with Jamie Jackson, I am one of the two staff co-liaisons to the CMAP Climate Committee. We'd like to provide an overview of the Climate Committee, its role, and the work that it's heard about and influenced in 2022. I'd also like to take a moment to thank both of our chair, Aaron Dernbaugh of Loyola University, who couldn't join us today, and our vice chair, Deborah Stone of the Cook County Department of Environment and Sustainability for their leadership of the committee this year. So Jamie and I will give you a brief overview of the committee today. As Aaron mentioned, included in the packet for today's meeting is our annual report, which provides a lot of the same information. So on the next slide, I'll share our committee charge. The committee was created in early 2022 by the CMAP board as one of three working committees alongside the Transportation Committee and the Regional Economy Committee. It was created to guide and support the agency's climate-related initiatives, the agency's strategic direction, and implementation of ONTO 2050. Membership of the committee consists of a range of representatives from state and local government, community-based organizations, advocacy groups, and academia from throughout the region. On the next slide is the committee vision, which establishes principles that guide the committee's work, including taking a regional perspective, expanding and supplementing staff knowledge and expertise, and serving as a resource on climate issues to staff, other CMAP committees, and other advisory groups. The vision includes a special focus on the strategic priorities for climate of reducing the transportation system's greenhouse gas emissions, improving the transportation system's resilience to climate change and flooding, and ensuring that the region's water resources are protected and sustainably managed. And on the next slide, Jamie will share some of the major areas of work from this year.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone. So in 2022, the Climate Committee really focused on CMAP's strategic direction and its climate work plan. In March, the committee received a presentation on the draft strategic direction and engaged in a discussion of how it could be adjusted to incorporate what the committee sees as regional priorities for climate. The discussion included the importance of considering land use, mode shift, and performance measures that help local partners track their climate goals. Each of the final three meetings of 2022 focused on, or will focus on, because we still have one more, one aspect of the overall climate program. So in May, the committee discussed CMAP's climate mitigation work plan, including the regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory, transportation mitigation strategies, and the EV charging infrastructure strategy. Members highlighted the need to emphasize the connection between climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, and address freight sector emissions and reduce vehicle miles traveled. In September, the committee discussed CMAP's climate resilient work plan, including including the resilience improvement plan for the regional transportation system, updating the flood susceptibility index, and incorporating equity and flood resilience investments. At that meeting, members discussed related projects that partners are undertaking that present opportunities for collaboration with CMAP and the importance of non-governmental resilience efforts. For our upcoming November meeting following Thanksgiving, we will feature a discussion of CMAP's water resources work, including water governance, water supply planning, and watershed planning. So that was a mouthful. Next slide, please. Many of the projects and programs discussed in 2022 will continue into 2023. Updates on CMAP's transportation mitigation work, resilience improvement plan, electric vehicle planning, and water work will be included in future agendas. Further discussion of performance measures to reflect the evolution of the strategic vision will also be considered. Committee members will be invited at the November meeting to propose additional topics to consider in 2023. Next slide, please. So that is kind of the overview of our whole work plan and our year in review. And we do have a few discussion questions that we wanted to walk through just to noodle and figure out, where are there areas for synergy between our committees and across the agency. And so, Brian, are we facilitating this one?
Yeah, I believe so. Thanks, Jamie. So yeah, there's 3 questions. We can take them in any order, but basically one is a broad question. Just we're curious what climate conversations you and your constituents or the committees that you're part of are having. We're also interested, and I think this connects to what Aaron presented at the beginning, in connecting our climate work to freight movement and thinking about how we discuss climate in the context of the freight work that CMAP does or that the regional economy or transportation committees consider. And then lastly, about a specific project, the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. That information has now been released. That was something the Climate Committee discussed earlier in the year. But now that the information is out, including the municipal level emissions summaries, we're curious if that information is being used in your community and what we can do to use this data to help you and your communities lower emissions.
Okay. Questions and comments, input for Brian and Jamie. Okay.
So I got
This is Jessica.
May I
I'm
go on?
chair. May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Please, Jessica, go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, Transportation Committee definitely talks about both climate and about freight. We have regular reports on air quality to the group and on the basically compliance requirements that the Transportation Committee has to fulfill as part of our obligations of federal government. So we regularly talk about air quality. I would say that it would be great for us to coordinate more on that subject because whenever we get a report on it, it seems that air quality is getting worse. It's very distressing every time we have a presentation on it. I would say that most of our work has been either on the very high level sort of policy around knowing that we want transportation improvements to improve air quality, not make it worse. But accompanied by these sort of administrative actions that we need to take to approve projects that go into the transportation improvement plan, which is sort of the list of all the transportation projects. We've yet to, I don't think anybody in the country has been able to do this, but sort of successfully tie those things together to say, all right, we know that the transportation improvements that we're making are actually improving air quality, especially now that we've seen air quality kind of get worse or taper off in some cases from all the improvements that the region saw over the last 30 years. So I would say there's lots to do here. On the freight side, we've talked a lot or heard a lot from our members about the new logistics facilities going up throughout the region and the sort of preponderance of small vehicles that are being used to deliver freight throughout the region. So I think that's a good topic for both the Transportation Committee and for the Climate Committee to be talking about. So happy to talk more about that, but those are my immediate thoughts in response to the questions that you have here.
Very good. Thank you, Jessica. Mayor?
And just to build on that, that wasn't one of the things I was going to say, but we're being, at least in the far suburbs, bombarded with logistics facilities, millions of square feet, and everybody's so excited to get this development in their town. I'm not necessarily convinced that it's positive for greenhouse gas emissions and other things. But so one of the things on the third point is I did receive the greenhouse gas inventory for Montgomery, and I sent that off to our staff. How does CMAP envision that we can utilize, or we should be utilizing that information to improve our situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for that input. I mean, I think that there's a lot of different ways that those can be used, and one of them certainly is that with any type of data on sort of current conditions, I think CMAP sees sees it as important to kind of establish a baseline so that we know what we're measuring against as we pursue, or our local partners pursue, any policies to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In the past, we haven't had the municipal level data, and now we hope to have that, on a regularly updated basis going forward. Obviously, it's not something that you can easily kind of track in real time and see as you're making improvements to your transportation system, what impact that's having, but hopefully it will at least give us a little bit of a yardstick and give you a yardstick to compare in future years. So hopefully that's of use. And I also wanted to just respond to the points that you both made about intermodal facilities, which is to say that has definitely come up with the climate committee. I think Jamie mentioned at our meeting on mitigation, a lot of members were interested in the connection between our climate goals and land use, and the way that, looking at other environmental impacts of some of the development tied to freight, both in terms of sort of natural resource impacts and climate impacts, and air quality impacts as well. So I'm glad to hear that that's resonating with your committees as well.
Good. Thank you, Mayor. Karen?
I just wanted to add a little bit of context too. One of the things that we've been measuring over time is just the difference in travel modes across the region by vehicle type. We just recently updated the data that we had on single occupancy vehicles. It also includes small freight vehicles, which we're seeing continue to increase over 2019 numbers. So small freight delivery package trucks are about 20 to 22% over 2019 numbers in terms of their vehicle miles traveled. That's an average Wednesday measurement that we use, but it's substantially higher than we anticipated before. Earlier last year when it was about 10 to 15%, but we're seeing, it definitely increase. I think to your question, President Brawley, about what to do with the greenhouse gas metrics, right? The baseline information is going to be important, but I think over the coming year, what we would like to do is figure out how we can be helpful to our communities, whether it's coming out and sort of presenting, here's the greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the region, and here's how that sort of gets broken down locally, and maybe sort of ideate with your village boards or your commissions or committees and experts to help us understand what else we might need to do in order to make that impactful. And so if you have ideas, or if you have thoughts, or if a local presentation would be helpful and discussion, we would certainly welcome the opportunity to do that locally.
Very good. And to piggyback, Aaron, on what you're saying, another tool with regards to air quality and the mitigation and the impact on communities, might we consider doing some brief PSAs that communities can put on their website or Facebook page, just real brief, here's the impact, this is what it means, and some small suggestions that everybody could easily perhaps do to contribute to the reduction in the air quality problem because we're seeing some big spikes from what you just said. So other thoughts and questions or comments, please?
Well, so that would be helpful, and then to utilize that in our land use decisions.
Yeah.
That's all any board really cares about is, we're trying to annex 200 acres and they want to do M1. And what is that going to mean for the entire region? To be able to lean on something that says this is, might look good up front, but
yeah.
I just want to note one other thing that we see happening, and on the one hand, it's a move by governments like the city of Chicago to try to track cumulative impacts of these developments, and they're putting quite a lot of money into 7 digits into developing some of these systems that are setting the baseline, and then we'll be able to model air quality impacts of different developments. And that kind of goes hand in hand with this big movement we see towards citizen data on air quality with the handheld and the small monitors that are available now. And I just think that's really gonna start to impact local communities and their thoughts about zoning and economic development, not just transportation investments per se. And it's something to watch, and it's not gonna go away.
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me. Are there any other thoughts on this topic? Okay. Jamie and Brian, thank you. We appreciate that input, and the contact information was on the screen. So if you have any additional input or thoughts, please reach out to Brian or Jamie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any closeout questions or comments? I don't believe there are. Okay, thank you. Hearing none, we'll move to our next presentation, which is item 4.02, the Community Alliance for Regional Equity, also known as CARE. Our next item, staff will talk about the Community Alliance for Regional Equity Program, excuse me, and we'll lead a discussion with the committee members. And I will turn this to Cindy Cambrick. Cindy, welcome.
Thank you. Buenos dias, everyone. Thank you so much for, first of all, being early morning risers. Your dedication is coming across. And for all of your thoughtful comments on the last item agenda. I hope we can also have some very thoughtful discussion at the end of this. The Community Alliance for Regional Equity is a program supported by CMAP to cultivate partnerships with community-based organizations that represent communities traditionally excluded from transportation planning. The goal is to make CMAP's investment process fair and strengthen communities with more holistic collaboration. Next slide, please. This project is being co-designed with a consultant team to design and execute a program that enhances engagement and participation by environmental justice communities and which meets the requirements of Title VI in MPO activities. So earlier, Aaron referenced that we're using federal transportation funds for this because there are lots of requirements that we have as an MPO. I won't go down the very long list, but basically these regulations require that all agencies receiving federal assistance demonstrate compliance with related laws and regulations so that all populations in the agency's study area enjoy the same benefits from federal investments, bear equivalent burdens resulting from the federal projects, and have equal participation in projects of local and state importance. Next slide, please. Now I want to share a little bit with you about the schedule. This is a 3-year program that we have going on at CMAP. As Aaron mentioned, we are in the first, this is the first time we're doing this program, so we are calling it a pilot program, but the hope is to have future years of this also. The development of CARE is divided into 4 tasks. The first task is program design and engagement program. The deliverable of the first task included a set of guiding principles for the program, a memo detailing the design of the program, and the document templates for implementing the program. Task 2, which we are presently in, involved recruitment and selection of participants for the program per the priorities defined in the program design task. This task includes an education and awareness component that will help ensure participating community groups understand the regional planning process. Task 3 involves processing and tracking stipend payments to participating community groups. This is a critical element of the program as the program must satisfy the requirements that come with federal funding. Several deliverables will be produced as part of Task 3, including documentation of program expenses that demonstrate that every dollar spent on the program was used appropriately. A closeout memo will also be provided that documents lessons learned and a plan for how to continue this program beyond the 3-year timeframe of the contract. And finally, Task 4 will provide an independent evaluation of the program to determine whether the program has achieved its goals. An evaluation report will identify implementation challenges, adaptations, and process outcomes. Based on qualitative data and best practices, it will generate recommendations for further institutionalizing community group engagement with CMAP. Next slide, please. After working with nonprofit leaders from across the region in Task 1, we designed a program with 4 key priorities: accelerate transportation and safety issues, contribute to regional decision-making processes, collaborate in engagement and planning tools, and reflect and shape the Alliance's processes and outcomes. We really wanted this to be a mutual experience for both CMAP and all of those involved with the Alliance. 12 community-based organizations will work with CMAP to make our investment processes more equitable and strengthen community collaboration. To compensate them for their time and expertise, each member organization will receive a $10,000 honorarium, which was co-developed with those community-based leaders from across the region. The Community Alliance to Regional Equity members will contribute their expertise and lived experiences to projects co-development with CMAP, either adding to existing CMAP work or developing new projects together. This next slide is pretty exciting. It's took a while to get here, but we are finally here, and you are the first group to ever see this list. But this is the list of our community alliance. We ask that you don't share it widely, as we're still notifying folks. But as of this morning, we heard that all 12 of the community-based organizations that we invited to be part of our first cohort have accepted the invitations. So it's wonderful. Applications opened on August 1st and closed on September 19th. And as Erin mentioned, we received over 55 qualified applications. And we had a team of about 18 CMAP staff that did care partnership conversations in the region, meeting people where they are. And for those that were not selected to be part of this cohort, we wanted to make sure to continue those relationships and to strengthen those relationships. And so we are not just saying no, but we're not saying no, but we're not saying goodbye. We are choosing to provide additional technical assistance and really, again, strengthen community relationships with community. The selection process was challenging, and given the strong group of organizations that applied. However, one important goal of CARE is to create a balanced representation of voices across the Chicagoland region, considering the geographic scope of the 7 counties, the communities we serve, both locally and regionally, as well as the connection with priority planning areas, including environmental, transportation, and mobility infrastructure. And so from the map here, the legend looks a bit small, and I apologize for that. But you can tell it basically describes whether the organization represents the place, county, or region and where they are located. And to the side, you can see the list of all of those organizations and areas that they represent. Next slide, please. So now I'd really like to, one, invite you all to provide any input that you might have on those community-based organizations, as well as, you know, if you've ever seen any type of advisory committee similar to work that has worked well, and if you have any lessons learned that you'd be willing to share with us. Have you seen engagement done well in your community or at your agency, and what did that look like? And finally, how can this contribute to your work? We want to make sure that this is meaningful, not just for the organizations that are involved with our first cohort, but also for CMAP and all of our committees and the work that we do here, because as I mentioned, we are hoping to be able to continue for many years to come with the Alliance, especially because we really are hoping to bring some of our most important agency initiatives to the Community Alliance. Thank you all for your time, and at this point I'll invite any questions, or I would appreciate any suggestions that you can give us all, because we've been really, really thoughtful with how we've done this process, and we've heard just tremendous feedback from everyone who went out into the region to interview. We didn't call them interviews, we called them partnership conversations, because we really wanted to make sure that this was the right partnership, not just for CMAP, but also for the community-based organizations that are participating.
Very good. Thank you, Cindy. We appreciate that. I'll start out the discussion under the engagement issue. How do we ensure that we're engaging all of the stakeholders in our community? In Richton Park, we've had a couple of experiences, both of them with the support of CMAP. The first was our 2014 comp plan, and then we also reviewed and updated our zoning codes. What we did was we did our outreach to the stakeholders. We reached out to our schools, our faith-based communities, all of our committees and commissions in the village. I think on this topic, it's very important to engage our younger people, our high school, college students, and perhaps even younger, and just see what their vision is, see how they're seeing important and things that are relevant to them. We did not have a formal committee. I think each organization or community should decide, should this outreach be a staff function, or should you form an actual committee? Both approaches, I believe, have merit. We also, as a tool, we used our social media accounts, and we also used our board meetings to make the announcements. So those are just a few of the things that we did, and they were successful. in the outreach, we got very good impact from a broad base of stakeholders in the community. But would like to open the discussion to others for thoughts and recommendations.
Well, thank you, Chair. I also just wanted to thank you for calling out the importance to youth engagement. It's been something that is really has been growing in importance to CMAP as an agency. You are probably familiar with our Future Leaders in Planning program, but you know, as we've been doing work with comprehensive plans, long-range comprehensive plans, and I was actually one of the staff that went out into the region and talked about 2050 and this plan that's 30 years into the future. And so sometimes it can be very difficult for, you know, folks to grasp that we're doing these plans for a longer period of time, but it's so important to involve the youth, because one of the things that I often joked about, and probably shouldn't say because this meeting is being recorded, but that, you know, in 2050, it's not going to matter what I think, because I will be retired sipping margaritas on a beach. It's really going to matter what, you know, the youth in our region think and believe, because they are going to be the ones who either keep this place, grow it, or evolve it. So thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Other input, please.
Yes, Cindy, just had a question. You touched on it a little bit. You had the 55 applicants for the partnership, and you guys selected 12. You touched on briefly, but how did you go about paring down those groups into the ones that you selected?
I really, really appreciate this question, because I shared the consultant team that we were working with, and we really wanted to be very thoughtful about how we did this, because you know, Aaron mentioned that we've got some federal funding that is tied to this, and we need to make sure that we are following everything to the T. And so it was very difficult to select the organizations and what that process would look like. So one, for transparency's sake, we wanted to make sure that we share with everyone that we needed to hit these sort of buckets, you know, the geographical, the local versus the regional, and also making sure that we are covering the marginalized communities that we are looking to work with. And so when we came up with this process, it was a very unique process. We actually had to train staff up on this process, and it was almost a merger between what we've done with our local technical assistance program when we go out into the region and we interview communities. But you know, with this, we also wanted to be a bit more innovative, because we're not necessarily looking for what we've been traditionally looking for in the past. And some of our guiding principles were actually CMAP's core values. We wanted folks that were innovative, that you know, fostered equity and collaboration, because that really is what we're looking for. And we were looking for a mix of a diverse group, you know, folks that are both at the local level and understand regional issues. And so we train staff up on how to do qualitative and quantitative style interviews, basically reading in between the lines. And so we had a set of questions that was co-designed with our consultants to kind of get at these questions, to get at the interviewee's understanding of what CMAP issues are. And really one of the things that we got from our advisory committee, which was leaders in year one that we involved from community-based organizations from across the region to help us design this. And one of the things that they said was that it was really important for folks to feel a sense of contributing to the greater good. Because again, this is something so large that we're talking about on the regional scale, and we're speaking with local community-based organizations very much like 30 years into the future. It can be a very difficult thing to comprehend. It's not necessarily tangible. And so to be talking to them about these important issues, we had to set a structure with staff to make sure that, you know, one, we weren't going to burden these organizations, and that also we were going to provide them with mutual learning. And so it was a very difficult conversation. I mentioned that we trained up all staff. So we worked with about 18 members of staff, and we met every single community-based organization at a location of their preference. Our preference was, again, to meet them in the region where they are, which they said was a very much appreciated effort, a very unique effort. And so we do have some selection criteria that we'd be happy to share with you all as far as how we did it, but we were really looking to make sure that we were reaching out to folks that hadn't traditionally worked with CMAP. So we worked with a list of about 22 marginalized communities, which includes people of color, people from the LGBTQ+ communities, people from the community with disabilities, English as a second language, and the list goes on. And so when we went out and did these partnership conversations, one, we wanted to make sure that people actually understood what we were looking to achieve, because that was very important to us. This is something new that has been tried to some scales across the nation, but not really to this effort, especially because we are compensating community-based organizations for their time and effort. And that's just something that we haven't found across the nation. So the short answer is we could share the selection criteria with you, because it is very detailed, because we wanted to do a mix of both qualitative and quantitative selection criteria.
Good, perfect.
I'm very excited about this. I think, you know, a few years ago in Montgomery, we updated our UDO with a CMAP LTA grant, and you know, we did the outreach that we're supposed to do. And I don't know exactly what our feedback was, but I think you get a lot of times where, you know, even the organizations, they're busy, they have things, they have their charter to focus on, I'm not sure, and then hitting them at the right time in the process. And I don't need to tell CMAP that, so that they feel like they've had a stake in the decision, as opposed to, you know, presenting them the plan at the end, which we've all seen done before. So I'm excited about this and how we can implement that in all of our own communities and out west.
Very good.
I'm so excited to hear that from you, because, you know, I think I work with a lot of community-based organizations. I'm the agency's lead on racial equity issues. And so we have found that one of the greatest barriers to having folks participate, you know, is, you know, just being compensated, because folks that we don't traditionally involve in the planning process are folks that, you know, have competing priorities. Putting dinner on the table, working a second job, figuring out how to pay the rent or how to pay the mortgage. And so we really wanted to remove that barrier, one, but also to compensate people for their intellectual property, because, you know, that is often one of the biggest barriers in participating with government, right? There's already this distrust of governments on community side. And so I believe that the way in which we've developed this program and gone out into the region with it has really been to make sure that folks feel dignified.
One other thought on engagement is we might consider, and I know we've used this as a conduit in the past, is reaching out to the local COGs, especially in terms of marginalized communities. The challenge many marginalized communities have is their resources are extremely limited. They're worried about keeping the water mains from breaking. So if there's an opportunity to give marginalized communities some support in organization and outreach and advice and guidance, that may benefit the outreach to marginalized communities. Are there any other thoughts, questions, or recommendations?
A couple of thoughts. At Cook County, we have a number of kind of similar efforts, and one is our Equity Fund Task Force, which is working to direct the allocation of a pool of money to projects that increase equity. But I think where the bigger impact has come from is trying to apply and using some of those groups to apply an equity screen to our business as usual. So we're going to amend our ordinance, apply an equity screen, who's going to be affected. We're going to amend our fee structure. We're going to amend the criteria for a program. So the more that group can be integrated into the business as usual, I think, maybe the more impact it might have. And the second thing that we're finding is, yes, it's important to compensate some of these organizations, and we don't really have a set policy yet. We know we have to do it. We haven't quite figured out what that looks like. But there's something about valuing people's time as well as compensating. And, you know, one of the things we're hearing is, you want my input on this? You've got to be kidding. I've been coming to hearings for blah, 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 and we've been writing comments for 10 years. You go back, you look at that, you tell us what you think we said, and we'll tell you if you got it. Don't ask me to do it all over again, and don't ask me to come to duplicate meetings that organizations that should be cooperating with each other are both having with our groups. You may not run into that so much outside the city of Chicago, where, you know, everybody's all going to the same people all the time. But those are just two of the things that I think we're finding.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. I'm sorry, was there someone else speaking?
No, please, Cindy, go ahead.
Oh, okay. No, I really appreciate you sharing that, because that is something that we've heard from so many of the marginalized communities that we've worked with, is this planning fatigue, you know, that we keep going back to these communities and asking them, what are your biggest assets? What are your biggest challenges, rather than going back and looking through the work that's already there. And so CMAP is actually trying to be responsive to that. And so in turn, we are doing new types of deliverables through our technical assistance program, where we are actually trying to look through path plans, funnel through those recommendations and strategies, and then touch base with the community to see if those are still relevant, or if there needs to be a new iteration of those. But I appreciate those comments, because CMAP has been trying to be responsive to that, and we haven't quite figured it out yet. So if you all have any, best practices to share, please let us know.
Very good. Thank you, Cindy. Any closeout questions or comments before we move on to our next item?
Sure, yeah, Chair, if I may.
Please.
Cindy, thank you so much for the presentation. This was really interesting. I think this is a great effort. I will agree with what other members have been saying. At RTA, we have been working on a new strategic plan for the transit system, and we had a number of new community groups partner with us in that process. We had about 100 different people from about 70 different organizations, some of which were government organizations, but many of which were community groups and advocacy groups. And it was really a great opportunity for people to learn from each other. And I think that there's a lot of value in being able to bring a lot of these groups into the decision-making process, as you described, and make sure that folks who've been left out of transportation decision-making are involved going forward. But I think a key side benefit or important benefit is having people interact with one another, and having the folks in government who are doing the day-to-day work, as Member Stone said, doing the day-to-day work and making decisions and seeing things through, are hearing from the community groups directly, and vice versa. The community groups are hearing from the people who are doing the work how they're doing it. And I think that I would encourage you, as you think about how to involve this group in CMAP's efforts, that you try to integrate them as much as possible into projects, so that there is that immediate interaction, and that it's not just up to staff to be kind of transferring information between the two groups, but they actually all interact with one another. So, and that's something that we learned, again, that was the main value of our process, was that these groups got to learn from each other, and there's a lot to be said for that.
I really, really appreciate you sharing that for two reasons. So first, I am familiar with the RTA's process in hiring community-based organizations as consultants for their strategic plans. I heard so many positive things with that effort. But again, RTA has a different set of funding than CMAP has. And so we have a lot more regulations that are tied to our funding. But again, I appreciate you bringing that up, because it was so important, and so many community groups found that beneficial. So I applaud RTA for that strategic plan effort. And then as far as involving them in the work, we haven't selected all of the projects that we're going to be bringing to the Community Alliance, because we want to be able to bring them a list of about 5 projects that we feel are timed rights for this initiative, and that are also some of our agency's biggest initiatives. And so one of those projects we are all thinking about is the Mobility Recovery Task Force, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The Illinois General Assembly asked us to produce a report that would include policy that could make a lot of those recommendations and strategies that came out of the Mobility Recovery Task Force into truly being able to be implemented. And so that is one of the projects that we are hoping to bring before the Community Alliance. And so that involves a lot of educating on our part, because again, these topics can be very wonky. And so we want to make sure that when we're talking to community members, they have a very thorough understanding of what it is that we're talking about and what it is that we're trying to achieve, so that they really do feel thoroughly involved in the decision-making process, again, because it's something that we're trying to do different. We're trying to, not just make decisions with leaders at the top, but instead trying to do things differently and involve folks who are really affected on the ground. So thank you for your comments.
Very good. Any final comments or questions? Okay, very good discussion. Thank you, everyone. Cindy, thank you for your presentation. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Our next item is item 5.0, which is other business. Is there any other business to come before the committee this morning? Thank you. Hearing none, we will move to our next item, which is 6.0 public comment. At this time, staff will read any comments that have been submitted prior to today's meeting and also recognize any speakers that may be in the chat box.
We did not receive any comments prior to today's meeting. Just a reminder, if members of the public want to speak up, please indicate so in the chat box. And we have not received any comments in the chat box so far.
Thank you. Okay, we'll close out that topic. 7.0 is our next item. We will have our next meeting sometime early in 2023. A date is to be determined, but we will keep you posted on that. Before we adjourn, is there any other business to come before the committee this morning? Okay, hearing none, we will then stand adjourned. Thank you all for your.
And real quick, I'm just so sorry. You were the very first to see this list of 12, and we are still going through the no but not goodbyes, also known as rejection letters and calls. So we ask that you please don't publicize this information widely. We have a media plan lined up, but please keep this discreet for now. Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. So noted. Thank you, Cindy. We appreciate that. And we will stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your participation this morning and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Staff makes it so easy.
We try. Thank you.